Thank you all very much. I could talk about this topic forever, which I'm sure everybody's dreading. So I want to just thank everybody involved, all the council members who made this happen, and all of you who also made this happen. This never happens by just council members sitting at the front of the room. The ability for the council to take this seriously always depends on, the movements out of the community. And I remind people, in the minimum wage fight, which was the last big fight of this kind of scale, it started from a proposal from me, but it wouldn't have gone anywhere if you hadn't stood up and said this is what needs to happen. And that's how real policy gets made. And I'm so glad to see everybody here today, because this is your victory. And it's a victory for the people who work for you, work with you, and it's a victory for everybody in this county. And there's a long list of organizations, which I don't have with me, but I know somebody's going to read the long list of organizations. But you all played just a critical role in getting this done, and I'm really happy to be here. I want to thank my housing director, Scott Britton, who's Scott was able to bring a very analytical approach to this, and his work, I think, was essential in working with the council, because he had to be able to show people how things would work and what this would mean. And I'm really happy I hired him, and I think he did an amazing job, and he's off on vacation, and he really deserves the vacation. I was bugging him at the airport last week with a question as he was leaving. I just thank all the council members who talked and compromised and came together. There were 3 different bills in this. There was a bill from Will, there was a bill from Natalie, there was a bill I sent over. And we took 3 bills and made sausage, which is what the legislative process is, to come up with a bill that could get 7 votes. And that's the critical thing, that people were not wedded to only one way of doing this, but that we were able to reach an agreement on how to do it best. And so I'm really excited about this. I've been working on this almost 16 years, first as a council member. I drafted 2 drafts of a rent stabilization bill. I circulated it to my colleagues. In 12 years on the council, not a single colleague walked into my office and said, "Can we talk about this?" I put it out there and it fell like a tree in a forest, which nobody hears. And that was, unfortunate. I came off the city council in Tacoma Park. I served there starting in 1987. And we had rent stabilization when I came in there. We still have it today. We faced a crisis around 2000 when we had lost a court case, and we had to make major changes in our law. We made changes in our law to make sure it stayed legal and defensible. And I wanted to thank that council for the willingness to actually change the law rather than walk away from it. Because it's real easy to walk away from things, particularly when a judge says you have to fix it. And we actually fixed it. So I was really proud then to be part of that. But I also know, from Tacoma Park, what I saw in terms of improving people's lives. I mean, we have one of the most stable communities in the county. People don't move. They don't move. And, people say this is a bad thing. Homeowners don't move. People live in their houses as long as they possibly can, but when tenants don't move, it's like, oh my God, something's wrong here. Tenants move because they can't afford the rent anymore most of the time. That's the truth. And you live from year to year, and when the rent reaches a point you can't afford it anymore, you're looking for another place to live. Homeowners don't face that. And I keep trying to talk to the broader public that homeowners don't have any of the experiences that tenants have. They don't worry about where they're going to find a house next year. They don't worry about, is my rent going to go up 6% or 8% or 10%, because they've got that long-term stability. And the idea that we have in society a whole class of people who don't know what stability means is actually a problem. People ought to be secure. And the most immediate things you see, the 2 things I'll just mention quickly. One is, I was a former school teacher. Stable rents meant stable communities. That meant kids stayed in school and multiple children from families went to the same school. They built relationships in the community. kids aren't traumatized. And if you don't think having to move every year or two is traumatizing for a little kid, you're wrong. It is stressful. When you hear parents saying, we have to find another house, we can't afford to live here anymore, I mean, I'm going to give up my friends, I'm going to give up my school, I got to go someplace else. That is not healthy for children. So I think, you know, the thing is that rent stabilization does is it provides community stabilization. That's good for education. The other thing it does for adults, it gives them a reason to get involved in the community. If I think I'm leaving next year, then I'm not involved in community groups, because the community I'm fighting for today might not be the community I'm going to live in a year from now. If you know that you're going to have the ability to stay where you live, then all of a sudden things matter to you. Things you put up with because you thought it was going to be temporary, you decide I don't have to put up with this anymore. I'm going to live here. I want you to do something about this. And you know it as homeowners, because homeowners will always come to you and say, I pay taxes here, I want this fixed. Renters can't say that. And they don't say that. And what you want is everybody to say, I pay taxes here. This condition, this situation is not acceptable. I want you to do something about it. So while it creates more people demanding action out of us, that's a good thing. I welcome that. Some critics say this is going to stifle development, and the part I love is it's the same ones who complain there hasn't been any development here for the last 2 decades, where there was no rent stabilization. So blaming something on this bill that is a pre-existing condition is a bit ridiculous. And the fact is that there's a report that Park and Planning did, my favorite organization. I always love to cite things they say, particularly when they're factual reports. And when they studied the White Flint situation, they said, why isn't no housing being built in White Flint? The landlord said, the potential builder said, because the rents aren't high enough. So here we are trying to stabilize rents, and for them, they're not building, not because of rent control, and they could set the rents in any level they want, but the rents aren't high enough. And that comes down to, you know, the folks who've been able to move into Montgomery County often don't have the rents that would justify $2,500 a month in rent for a 1-bedroom apartment. It's also, you know, a failure of the planning department, and I'll say this bluntly. They don't plan for complete communities. They plan for complete streets, but the idea that you would have planned Bethesda for a variety of housing to serve a mix of population rather than settling for 15% affordable units, and then an enormous gap. The average MPD in Montgomery County for a 1-bedroom is about $1,600, and 2 bedrooms, $1,800. I checked this morning. 1-bedroom starting rents in Bethesda, $2,500. 2-bedroom starting rents, $3,500. $2,500 starting rent requires a $100,000 income. If you spend the most that you're recommended to spend is 30%. And that $3,500 starting rent requires a $140,000 income. That's what they build there. And it never dawned on Park and Planning that you're building a very segregated community if this is what your idea of housing is. So this is on all of us, and we've got to do a better job in terms of how we plan things. It's great to plan complete streets. You ought to be planning complete communities. And, you know, the other point I'll make is Montgomery County has 40,000 approved units almost in a pipeline. That means the developer could go in and pull their building permit. There's not a regulatory hurdle left to climb, and it's still sitting there. And that goes back to the comment about the rents aren't high enough. So enough about blaming this action this council made for the lack of housing that hasn't occurred for the last 20 years. We need to get real about what's going on here and deal with it. To those who say the market's going to solve the problem, there's a recent report from the Harvard Joint Center on Housing Studies. This just came out. We just saw it a couple of days ago. And it said this country is having a housing boom. Unfortunately, none of it's for low-income people. It is all focused at the top tier of incomes. It is not focused. And so if anybody says there's not demand, I would submit that when you've got 50,000 people in this county making $50,000 or less and paying half their income for rent, there's plenty of demand. Nobody's meeting the demand. So let's stop pretending that demand will solve the problem. Milton Friedman does not have any answers to our question. So we're actually on track for housing numbers that I think the council would be happy with. That we were able to correct a mistake by one of the housing reporting agencies, because our numbers apparently weren't going in. We produced almost 4,000 units the last 2 years in Montgomery County. But 15% of them would be MPDUs, so do the math. I mean, it's like 600 units a year at best. So that's what we're doing. We are building, and we're on track to build 40,000 over 10 years to get really close to it. But that's not enough in terms of who lives here and what we need to provide. So there are a lot of things that are going on. This bill is going to make an enormous difference for people. This is worth fighting for. And there are people who are going to be able to stay in their homes and have some security, to have a sense of what their long-term costs are going to be, and make decisions about where they want to live and be able to stay there. And I really want to thank the 7 of you. Evan's not here. I know he's on vacation. That's allowed. Everybody should do that. He's not? Okay. Okay. Still, well, he's working someplace else. There's plenty of work to do. So I want to thank you all for coming together on this. I know how hard this was. There was a lot of back and forth. There was a lot of talking among everybody in this group to come together. And if people had not been open to listening to each other and working with each other and trying to get to yes, because it's not yes for anybody individually. It was yes for the community, and that to me is the important thing. I could care less about ideology and all this other stuff. This is about human beings, and it's about what happens to human beings in their lived experiences in Montgomery County. And at the end of the day, people were able to come together around what's going to happen to people and not fuss over what belief system does this reflect. It's about the belief that human beings should have stable housing and should be able to live in this community. That's the only recognition of a belief system we need. If everything was done like that, we'd have far fewer problems in society if we focused on what do people need and what do we need to do to treat them right. So I'm excited about this. I'm optimistic that we're going to continue to make progress. There are some other things we need to do. We need to deal with no net loss of affordable housing. This county started with 42,000 affordable units in 2000. If you'd gone back another 10 years, it probably would have been twice as many, but 42,000 in 2000. It was down to about 22,000 by 2020. Park and Planning projects we lose another 11,000 by 2030, and that was pre-COVID. COVID has already known accelerated rents. And so we're losing the naturally occurring affordable housing, which are units that have no controls on them. These are just units that the market has raised to prices that people who live there can no longer afford. We need to deal with more ownership in the community, continuing to provide only rental housing, and this is frankly on our nonprofit partners as well. Everybody's got to shift their thinking to wealth building and equal opportunity. If all we offer tenants and people in lower incomes, which frankly in Montgomery County is people making $70,000, $80,000 a year in some cases, if all we offer them is rental units, they never get to build wealth in the community. And so there's this enormous wealth divide between white and black people and brown people. And that's something we've got to tackle, because if it's not going to go away by itself, it's going to require deliberate actions. And we've got to be creative about what the county does. So we've been creative. We bought Westchester West. We put a lot of money in it to protect that development. We've been working with, on Randolph Road to build a mixed project that has both rental and ownership, but almost all the units, I think all the units there are actually affordable. So those are things we need to do, and we've had council support for those things. So stay tuned, more is going to be coming, and we're going to need more support to do this. But this is probably the most righteous fight anybody can have. There's nothing more righteous than fighting for a person's right to stay and enjoy a life that's stable and have the opportunities. And I just want to say this is a momentous occasion for Montgomery County. It is, other than the minimum wage law, probably the two most important things that we have done in this county in terms of equalizing things and raising people up. And so I want to thank the council for everything you did. Give them an applause. And give yourselves an applause for what you did. If you had not been in those rooms, If these issues had been debated in empty halls, the outcome would have been different. Without your presence, and you got to keep this in mind, without your presence, things do not move. So be present, be regularly present. What we do up here matters. And what we do up here, if we don't hear from you, is done in partly a vacuum. So please continue your work. Thank everybody for what they did. It's a really great victory today, and I'm really happy we're celebrating this. And you know, I spent a long time trying to get this done. I will say finally, it was good to have a council where this discussion did not fall on deaf ears. That with the election of this council in November, they started on the work to create this bill within a month. So that says a lot about what elections can do and why elections matter. That election changed the debate in Montgomery County. And again, you're the ones that voted. Thank you.